By the way, Paine was only about 38 when he was writing this. So I got to say, I really appreciated having a septuagenarian and I assume an octogenarian who've both had many more years under their life experience belts.
I don't have that many arms.
Oh. but you both could see through some assumptions that I think that Paine had made in writing this, and but we'll leave that in last week. I really wanted to focus on the last sentence from the last paragraph that we covered last week, namely that idea that security being the true design and end of government. And I also wanted to bring up what someone else had done, and I know we're going like that again. Let me do this one more time. I guess we'll go here. So you're all familiar with this fellow, the first vice president and second president of the United States.
Who's that?
John Adams.
Oh, okay.
He also echoes the idea that government is for protection, safety, and then he adds prosperity and happiness for the people in whole, not specific people. But I think we can take to assume in this quote. Are you able to see the John Adams quote on your screen?
No, you need to take and put up whatever you did before. Right now, I can't see hardly anything on it.
Okay. All I can see is David and myself.
Yeah.
And a couple of black spaces. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
And I see a quote from John Adams and his portrait beside it.
Right. Yeah. I see that too.
And I'm hoping that being a resident of Massachusetts, I'm hoping Dot hops back in with us.
I'm here.
Great. Do you want? Who wants to read this quote? Maybe, I don't know, David?
Yeah. It says, government is instituted for the common good, for the protection, safety, prosperity, and happiness of the people, not for the profit, honor, or private interest of any one man, family, or class of men. John Adams, second U.S. president.
First half, this is a quote out of the first half of the Second Amendment to the Constitution of Massachusetts, where John Adams hailed from. And I brought this up as a sort of another voice in the crowd of people who went towards the founding of this country. Back in chapter 6 of Project Gutenberg, I've got to switch tabs here. Paine was talking about a Chrome tab and Gutenberg share. Paine was talking about, here we go. Security being the true design and end of government. And then he goes on and says that, however, we can create a government that produces security that costs the least and gives us the most, basically the best value to be preferable to any others. And that's Paine's assumption. Mike, I think you might have something to say here.
What's that?
I'm hearing an echo, so that's an indication that Mike's microphone is unmuted.
Well, I can mute it.
Oh, okay. So the reason why I brought that up was I don't quite recall if we came to a consensus last week, but I know I was asking the question: is security the true design and end of government?
Is it the security, the true design and end of government? I think that's what people search for, but the only thing is, that's why you have, I don't know what is really meant by this whole thing. What you're looking for, I mean, obviously the more security you have, the less cost that you have, like he says, with the least expense, it has the greatest benefit and is preferable to all. But the only thing is, what happens to governments, the thing is their demise. I don't know if I read this from Aristotle or one of these guys, but the thing is, all governments come and fall apart and are destroyed from within through nepotism and cronyism, which is a problem that we currently have in our federal government and is really the foundation for our destruction that we're going through right now. So the thing is, when you have that, you have larger government because people always want to have their family members to give them a job and to find them employment, or friends of theirs too to give employment. And government is really easy to do that. As a matter of fact, when you look at it, that's what brought the democracy down for the Greeks over 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago. That there is the real problem with inside of it, and trying to keep it small is almost an impossible thing to do unless you have some kind of legislation to do that, Jefferson was aware of all this stuff.
Right. Other thoughts?
Well, the first thing I was thinking of when they said security is people on welfare. Like, you feel kind of secure because somebody else is taking care of you. So in a way, this sentence didn't make sense to me. Or this might sound weird, but when how do they say that? When a woman is she's looking for a man that makes all kinds of money and takes care of their family. She doesn't have to go work or whatever. She feels secure. Some women are like this, not me, but they feel secure because of the financial freedom. So I thought this was almost an ironic statement.
I have a slightly different take on what's going on here.
Please.
Let's hear it, Mike.
That's why we're here.
Okay. It seems to me, from what I understand of history, that there has always been this massive current of thought running through the history of each country, that you have in any given country some family or class to whom the government of the country has been given. This would be a monarchy, it would be an aristocracy, might be a landed class, and that the country should be run for the benefit of the quote unquote important people. At the point in history at which the American Revolution is taking place, you have these ideas circulating in Europe and coming to America, saying that this is not necessarily so, that the government should not be viewed as something which is the property of the important class.
Somebody's got to mute up.
Yeah.
Apologize.
Maybe
Okay.
it's Tommy.
Website.
Now, when the colonists want to justify their rebellion from the royal government in England, they are perfectly aware, and of course, aristocracies and monarchies are also aware, that anarchy, in which you have no government, can be a very terrible thing, that there does need to be protection and order in society. But the question becomes one of, for whom is this protection and order to be maintained? On whose behalf should the power of the government be used? And what Adams is claiming here and what Paine is claiming here is that it ought to be on behalf of the people as a whole, not merely the royalty or the aristocracy or the landed class or the landowners or capitalists or merchants or whoever, but for the people as a whole.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mike. I mean, that's pretty much what the Declaration of Independence is all about, and also the Constitution, I think, as well. I think the founders, tried to take and get it right to, put the power into people's hands as much as they possibly could.
Okay.
And then they made it possible, too, so that, if things were wrong, they could be corrected. But sometimes power, when things get corrected, they go overboard as far as having a much larger government and doing that, which sort of destroys the total intent of what John Adams is trying to say here,
Okay. David, may I take a slightly different stance?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think John Adams is necessarily thinking one way or the other about the size of the government, at least not at this point. I think his concern, and that of Thomas Paine, is who does the government work for? And my own point of view tends to be that in some sense, the size of the government is not the real question. The size of the government ought to be apportioned to whatever task is considered to be the rightful task of the government. Certainly, one of the things that we always want is the government, in some sense, to let us go on and live our lives with as little interference as possible. Yet another thing that we want the government to do is to tend to great matters which we as individuals cannot cope with on our own. Such things, for example, as the Tennessee Valley Authority, where cheap electricity was made available to a large number of people. Such things as dealing with the pandemic and manufacturing vaccines. So I tend not to feel, that the concern that I think that you feel about the size of the government necessarily. Sometimes it gets too large and needs pared back. Other times it is far too small to do the job which is at hand. And we will continually have to go through history deciding what size we want the instrument to be. But the problem, I think, tends to arise when you have some minority portion of the nation which gets its hands on controlling what it is the government should do, what its priorities should be, and sizing it to that rather than necessarily to the demands, the questions, and the needs of the populace as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And I want to take an opportunity to remind that I think that the government has always been more or less run or led by some supermajority of persons, because when it comes down to just size of people in government versus the rest of the population, you're always talking about a fraction of a percent. By the way, we have a new visitor with us this evening, Elle Hillcox. I'd like to welcome you. I think you're coming from the New York area, if I'm not mistaken. And don't feel like you have to speak. It's completely voluntary. I'm going to go ahead and switch us over to so that we can start reading from chapter 7. Let me just switch tabs here.
Hey, Rami, I got a question for you.
Go ahead.
Since you're focusing on Thomas Paine so much, what was the biggest common sense thing that he said that helped to take and, get people excited about the Revolutionary War?
Well, I'm reading just right alongside with you here for the first time. I wanted to come at this fresh, so it was to almost have the discoveries raw. But I do think he led it very nicely when he separated the idea between government and society as being two separate objects. And you and Mike both did an excellent job of tearing down and making short work of Paine's perspective of society in general. So I thank you for that. Share. Here we go. So jumping into paragraph 7, would anyone like to read this opening paragraph for us this evening?
Where's that? The one on the top?
Yes.
Should we do it? If we're going to take and break this down, maybe we should read it by sentence or the whole thing.
Would you like to read the whole thing?
Well, I can do that.
Okay.
In order to gain a clear and just idea of the design and end of government, let us suppose what the heck thing is covered? Oh, let us suppose a small number of persons settled in some sequestered part of the earth, unconnected with the rest. They will then represent the first peopling of any country or of the world. In this state of natural liberty, society will be their first thought. 1,000 motives will excite them thereto. The strength of one man is so unequal to his wants, and his mind so unfitted for perpetual solitude, that he is soon obliged to seek assistance and relief of another, who in his turn requires the same. 4 or 5 united would be able to raise a tolerable dwelling in the midst of a wilderness. But one man might labor out of the common period of life without accomplishing anything. When he had felled his timber, he could not remove it, nor erect it after it was removed. Hunger in the meantime would urge him from his work, and every different want call him a different way. Would urge him from his work, and every different want call him a different way. Disease, nay, even misfortune, would be death. For though neither might be mortal, yet either would disable him from living, and reduce him to a state in which he might rather be said to perish than to die. What's the difference if you perish and you die? Same thing, isn't it?
Maybe meaning like lose your heart to work.
Oh.
So I think that paragraph can be summed up by stating that we need each other. I mean, unless we have like a semi truck and a load of diesel and a front end loader and those machines that chop down and haul trees. I know one guy who's living down in Panama on a series of islands and building homes and posting them on YouTube. So it's possible to do it on your own, but it's certainly easier when you've got a set of others who you're working with to achieve a set of goals. At least if you're the type of person who can get along with others, make things happen. Does anyone else have any comments about chapter 7 or paragraph 7?
Yeah. Even in the Bible, God tells us that a man needs a helpmate, and that would be his wife. So that's kind of a microcosm of society, the way he's explaining it.
Yes, indeed, and I think a number of people throughout time have stated that the basic building block of every nation is the family.
Totally agree. My dad used to say, when the family falls apart, there goes the country.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm nodding. Yes.
So how do you put it back together?
Well, yeah, you got to focus on the family, right? And there's a whole national radio syndicated program that's just about that too.
Yeah, that's right. Focus on the family. Never thought about it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Unless anyone else has anything else to say about paragraph 7, I'm going to see if we can move on to paragraph 8. And who would like to read this paragraph?
I'll take it.
All right.
Okay. Thus, necessity, like a gravitating power, would soon form our newly arrived emigrants into society. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. The reciprocal blessings of which would supersede and render the obligations of law and government unnecessary, while they remained perfectly just to each other. But as nothing but heaven is impregnable to vice, it will unavoidably happen that in proportion as they surmount the first difficulties of immigration, which bound them together in a common cause, they will begin to relax in duty, in other words, get lazy, and attachment to each other. And this remissness will point out the necessity of establishing some form of government to supply the defect of moral virtue.
Wow. So he's saying, I mean, he's not trying to reinforce or to put extra guides or guards or supports towards promoting moral virtue. He's just accepting as part of human nature that people are going to get lazy, and the government's going to have to fill in. So that's quite an assumption, I think, that Paine's making.
It kind of reminds me of the little town that we used to live in, Glastonbury, Connecticut, before the kids moved to Boston, and we followed them. We had a no light center. There was not even one light. And before that, there were just stop signs. And I'm assuming that before the stop signs, people were just courteous and let each other go around the corner or straight through, and they watched out for each other. But eventually, some people ruin it, and maybe we all ruin it to our own degree. And then you have to start building some kind of structure, law, enforcement, whatever. Yeah, I think it's just natural that you have to go that way.
Anyone else have a comment for paragraph 8?
She said it very good.
Okay. I'll read chapter 9 because it's short. Some convenient tree will afford them a state house, under the branches of which the whole colony may assemble to deliberate on public matters. It is more than probable that their first laws will have the title only of regulations and be enforced by no other penalty than public disesteem. In this first parliament, every man by natural right will have a seat. I love this idea, and I've actually witnessed it in videos of small villages in Africa where still today they'll gather around the largest tree in the village and discuss things out. And in that sort of situation, very much it is about keeping faith, and that is important in the village because people will either respect or not respect you based upon how you behave in that village. I'm sorry, I'm just going to mute myself for a moment. Go ahead and discuss amongst yourselves.
Well, number one, the thing is, it's talking about by natural right. Okay, the thing is, if you had a group of people, somewhere, no matter where it is, there has to be an order to taking and exposing and talking, sharing your own ideas. And I don't know that there is a natural right. I think from the time you have one or two people, even in a household with a married couple, you have regulations that are set up by the head of household, and or the head of households, however you look at it, the man and the woman together, or the man, so that it's not a natural right, but a created right that mankind does because of his desire to be with other people, to work things out and to make things better.
Thank you, Dave. Mike, what do you think?
Well, yes, I think this is a fairly reasonable and appealing description of the way people ought to get along with one another in small self-organizing groups. As David pointed out, I'm not sure this is exactly what David pointed out, but even in small groups, though, you will sometimes see things start to go bad, because you will start to see certain people who may begin to develop bad habits, people who may discover that if they act angry, or if they're big and strong, they can get the other people to do what they want, even if maybe the majority of people are opposed to them. So you, right from the start, there is always the possibility of the serpent entering in to a given community. And certainly customs and what Paine refers to as regulations sometimes arise as a means of trying to combat such evils. And they probably work imperfectly, work for a while, don't work, need to be changed, etc. And as a society gets larger and larger, it gets more and more complicated to set these rules, regulations, and customs up.
Yes, we've got common law, which, again, I'm not a lawyer or a British historian, but I know that in...
There's a big echo.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mike. Thank you. When lawyers have to, or rather when judges have to come up with decisions, they'll be going back hundreds and hundreds of years in precedents to find which way to go in deliberating a judgment for a certain issue. So we've got a rich tradition of what to pull from. Does anyone else have anything to say about chapter 9? I'm sorry, I keep saying chapter, but it's paragraph 9. Or do we have a volunteer to read paragraph 10? Or would Elle like to introduce herself and say where she's coming in from, and just say hi?
Yes, hi. Hi.
Welcome.
Hi there. Hi. I'm coming in from near Albany, New York, and I'm doing some things around the house, so I haven't been able to really actively, fully participate. I'm hoping you don't mind if I listen. I love philosophy.
Not at all. You're most welcome to simply listen in. I just want to make sure you felt welcome, and it's good to have someone from Albany here with us this evening. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks. All right.
Mike,
I'll
would you like to read? Okay, David. All right.
Yeah, I'll read that. But as the colony increases, the public concerns will increase likewise, and the distance at which the members may be separated will render it too inconvenient for all of them to meet on every occasion as at first. When their number was small, their habitations near, and the public concerns few and trifling. This will point out the convenience of their consenting to leave the legislative part to be managed by a select number chosen from the whole body, who are supposed to have the same concerns at stake which those who appointed them, and who will act in the same manner as the whole body would act were they present. If the colony continue increasing, it will become necessary to augment the number of the representatives, and that the interest of every part of the colony may be attended to. It will be found best to divide the whole into convenient parts, which parts sending its proper number, and that the elected might never form to themselves an interest separate from the prudent electors. Prudence will point out the propriety of having elections often, because as the elected might by that means return and mix again with the general body of the electors in a few months. Their fidelity to the public will be secured by the prudent reflection of not making a rod for themselves. And as a frequent interchange will establish a common interest with every part of the community, they will mutually and naturally support each other. And on this, not on the unmeaning name of king, depends the strength of the government and the happiness of the governed. That's very, very true. I mean, there is common sense right there, very common sense statement. But the only thing is that doesn't exist in our government.
Oh, it does to a degree. This is great.
Very
because
small degree.
Well, paragraph 10 introduces for us the idea of representative democracy.
Yep.
And like my father would say, if it's the right time of the year and you need something done, he'll go, well, we've got an election coming up in a few months. Talk to your representative. Because then, I don't know if you have it the rest of the time, but then you've got at least a chance of being heard, and that may go somewhere. Whether that's the case anymore because of the size and the difference in ratio, at least on the federal level, like you might have a chance, perhaps a little bit more on the county level, but once Congress decides to limit its size to 535 members in both houses, the ratio between the electors and the elected has only grown in size over the last however long it's been since that amendment was passed in the early 20th century.
I think the real problem is that the founders intended for the people that represented their little, communities or whatever to be almost like volunteers. They didn't, in the old days, they didn't really have situations where they were in term for so long that they started feeling comfortable with cronyism and nepotism and lining their own pockets, and that's where we are today, unfortunately.
Yep.
I was
exactly right.
I was in a community where it reminded me of a microcosm of the United States government. We had 200-300 people in our condo association. We had different condo buildings, and the people that ran it were in some position or other for so long that they had their sons doing the excavation work for walls and not getting, 3 proper quotes and things like that. It was really, really hard to get them out, but we eventually did.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to do that now.
Yep. Exactly right. I like this concept. It's really, really good. I mean, the thing is to have, people rotate a lot. And the thing is, the Republican Party, I think they try to do that more so than the Democratic Party does, because it seems like, they go there and they're business people, so they don't want to spend their entire life, in the Senate or in the Congress. Senators do, but not the Congress, because they come home to, take and operate their businesses and so on and so forth.
Some of them.
Yeah, right.
I think to a certain degree, both of the major parties are guilty of having a certain core sort of leadership that sticks around for a very long time. Perhaps McConnell on the Republican side and Pelosi on the Democratic side.
Yeah, but the thing is, the state of Florida here, I think they have to rotate their congressmen and senators out every so often. You know, they have term limits on them.
Is that part of our? Is that part of our the 1968 Constitution? Because I know here in Florida we're also on our fifth Constitution as a state.
I don't know what part it is, but I just know that they rotate out after they're in office for a certain period of time. You know, they won't let them stay in. I mean, that's part of the Constitution here.
You guys do a lot in Florida that I think is right, and it really shows, especially right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's coming through right now. It certainly is.
Everybody wants to move down here. All the prices are going up.
Yeah.
We're looking at property right now. We were coming for January and February. We're renting our daughter and son-in-law's place in Melbourne.
Uh-huh.
And it just looks so good that it's March now and we still don't want to go home.
Yeah, the risk is that the natives, the folks who grow up here, will be likely priced out and become refugees out of their own state. Because once people from California and New York move in with their sort of money, because the cost of living in the Northeast and out west tends to be so much higher, and they're coming with so much more buying power. Plus, foreign investment in real estate just drives the markets up, and then.
Yeah, but that's been happening here for the past 20, 30 years.
And part of our system here in Florida is also based upon needing constant growth. It's built into it.
It seems like you guys do very well with what you have. Like, for instance, one of the attorneys at one of the seminars we were at in Connecticut a few years ago said, you know, my husband used to work for the state and he's got a pension. And they said, you know, there are only, I think, 6 or 7 states that don't charge income tax on your pension. And I know New Hampshire was one, and I said, that's too cold. And I know Florida was another one. And he and I still look at all the bridges and beauty and beaches. You have so many gorgeous beaches that are available to everyone on your oceans. And we're used to Rhode Island and Massachusetts and Connecticut. And when you go to a beach there, you're paying $20 to park. And 80% of the beaches up and down the Space Coast where I am right now, you can park anywhere. It's almost like it's a created paradise and they're not taxing you for it. I don't know how you can afford it. It's fantastic.
You just jump on the toll roads. That's
Oh, that's right. You have toll roads somewhere. We just never go out like that.
Right.
We're so
they got them all over.
We stay home.
Or stay in a hotel in Orlando. They get your tax that way.
That's right. Yeah, but the people who come and enjoy the place, they get there. That's how we're funding them.
They don't realize it, but they're paying our taxes.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we've got some real natural advantages that are unique here, such as the huge amount of coastline that we have. So, let's see if we can squeeze in paragraph 11. And I'm wondering if Mike, you'd be willing to read for us. Let me scroll up.
Let's see. That's the one that starts with "here then."
Yes. Let me move that. There we go.
All right. You're yanking it away from me. Here then is the origin and rise of government, namely, a mode rendered necessary by the inability of moral virtue to govern the world. Here too is the design and end of government, namely freedom and security. However, our eyes may be dazzled with show or our ears deceived by sound. However, prejudice may warp our wills or interest darken our understanding. The simple voice of nature and of reason will say, it is right. Let's see.
So moral virtue alone isn't enough. Is not, is what he's saying.
Well, I'm not sure what he is saying there when he talks about our eyes being dazzled with show or our ears deceived by sound. However, I know that this picture that he paints of government as tending naturally to something where the people elect representatives is something that we have almost never had as government amongst societies on earth. Societies have almost always been run by aristocracies or small groups of the powerful.
Right.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
The thing is, I noticed that they've used the word virtue a couple of times, and right now he's using the word moral virtue. I mean, the thing is that there is sort of a virtue is sort of conditional upon the perception of individuals rather than something as an end result of things. Virtue is different for different groups.
Let's mute, please.
So when he's talking about moral virtue to govern the world, what moral virtue is he looking at?
A little further down, where we're talking about the dazzle, the show, and what we see with our eyes and with our ears. That could be, remember, he's an Englishman, so he could be talking about the pomp of the monarchy and the idea of, I'm sorry, my mind is flashing to Monty Python, The Search of the Holy Grail, and where the king is riding along in his bright white tunic with his helper with his coconuts as though he's riding on a horse. And there are these two peasants, and they're in the field, and they're moving manure around. And one of them says, "Who's that?" And the other goes, "Oh, that must be the king." "Well, how do you know he's the king?" "Well, he's not covered in manure."
It's true.
All right, I think that he's trying to say something like, this is the point of government to assure our freedom and security. However, if you have individuals trying to see that we have freedom and security, it is easy for them to be misled, dazzled with show, or their ears deceived by sound. It is easy for their judgment to be warped. But this is what we really want the government to do. Therefore, it is necessary to have a government, some sort of structure, which I think he is trying to say ought to be greater than simply the power and the ability of the individuals who are supposed to be our leaders. I think this is the idea he's trying to get at.
I don't know that government needs to be greater, but I think it perhaps shows itself as being a necessity, only because we're not angels, like Madison said. And I think the drill down after the semicolon, the prejudice may warp our wills and the interest darken our understanding. If we have a vested interest in a situation, we're not going to come at it with an open mind. We're going to come at it with an idea of fulfilling our interests. So I love his use of the word darken our understanding, because it really can cause us to lose the objective perspective.
Yeah, but everybody has a prejudice in their own life anyway, with their own, what I call environmental habituation. Whatever you've picked up in your environment that makes a part of you, and think the way you think and do the things you do. I mean, that there is your environmental habituation, which is different from other people, which is going to be prejudiced. It's that simple. There's no way to get around it.
And the word prejudice probably could be substituted with bias.
Yeah, you could. Yes, absolutely. But I think exactly right. That's another synonym for it, I would think. Yep. Yep, absolutely. That's the thing with our English language. We have so many different words that all mean the same thing.
Well, slightly different flavors of the same idea, yes. We are at 7:52, so it's time to wrap up. Does anyone have any commentary for tonight's session?
Yeah, what happened to what was it? The address of the union or whatever they call it last week?
Right. Yes, I was going to have this originally the week before, but because I had read an AP article just a day or three after our last session, stating that there was going to be a State of the Union on that Tuesday night. I wanted people to have the opportunity to catch it live, but it turns out that fizzled away.
Well, you ain't going to see that happen.
Who knows if we'll have a State of the Union under number 46?
Guy can't speak two sentences. How's he going to speak the State of the Union?
I wonder if your laughter is going all the way around the world about us. It's sad.
I don't know.
Well, there's either a double, like stand-in guy, or there's the 25th Amendment. But yeah, this is the oldest president that we've ever elected, and I personally trust Mike before I would trust Joseph. But that's just my own personal bias there.
Yeah, me too. I think you'd be much better around me than what we got.
Well, I guess we're going to have to leave it at that. I'm, by the way, not seeking after any office, so don't put me forward on any write-in ballots. Thank you. Unless anyone else has anything else to say this evening, I want to thank each of you for attending, and another week or two, and I'll notify each of you when we'll have our next session.
See you next time.
Yeah. Next time.
Thank you so much, and have a very good night. And it was really good. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll hope to see you again. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night, Rami.
Bye.
Great job. Bye-bye.